Good morning, everyone, from the QUINEBAUG River. We are just across the border from Jewett City in Canterbury, and we are cleaning up the watershed. We're just kicking off the Project Oceanology crew cleanup for Earth Day, and it's a beautiful day at that. You can see the QUINEBAUG River flowing right here. My name is Debbie. I'm one of the educators at Project Oceanology. I am beginning our crew cleanup on the QUINEBAUG River. We're going to clean up the watershed every hour from 10 to 2. There will be a different educator going live to share their cleanup efforts. We recommend, if you're cleaning up in the watershed, that you only do so with members of your household. That's going to limit the spread of COVID-19. I know it is Earth Day, and more people than usual will want to get outside and be using this beautiful outdoor space today. That's a safe way to do it, but you want to make sure that you stay in small groups and only with members of your household. So we're excited to get started cleaning the QUINEBAUG River watershed. The QUINEBAUG is a pretty long river that flows all the way down and feeds the Setauket River, which then feeds the Thames River, which then flows to Long Island Sound. So I can hear some wildlife here at the river. Just before I went live, I was hearing some belted kingfishers. Those are fish-eating birds, so they were using the river, and I believe I just heard a raven. I've only heard that call a couple times in my life, so it's still a new one to me, but I believe there's a raven here in the brush next to the QUINEBAUG River. So if you're just joining us, again, my name is Debbie. I'm kicking off our crew cleanups in the watershed. A watershed is the area of land that drains to a body of water. So some people will call it a drainage basin, but if rain falls on your house, you are part of a watershed. Even if you don't live directly adjacent to any water, you are part of a watershed. So the water that lands on your yard or on your home will eventually either seep into the ground or travel across paved surfaces and drain to some other water sources. So in this case, my home drains to the QUINEBAUG River. So I came to the waterfront here in the QUINEBAUG to do a little bit of watershed cleaning. So as I said, if you don't live directly at the water, you can do some cleanup near your home and still be protecting the ocean. So my husband and I have been picking up some trash here this morning. The equipment that I have with me, I have a bucket so that I can sort my trash into recyclables and landfill garbage. So we found a lot of plastic things. Many of these things may not be recyclable, but some of them after a rinse may be salvageable. So we'll be able to sort those when we're done. I also brought a contractor bag to put the pieces of trash in there. So that can go straight to the landfill, and I'll be able to recycle a lot of the things that we're finding in here. I also brought a pair of vinyl-lined gloves so that I can protect my hands from some of the trash that we'll be picking up here in the watershed. So again, I'm here with my husband. We're cleaning up, and some of the trash that we're finding, since we are on the QUINEBAUG River that leads to the Setauket, that leads to the Thames, that leads to Long Island Sound, some of these objects could float as far as Long Island Sound and the ocean. So if you clean up your watershed, you can then protect the ocean as well. Now, when I'm looking at some of the objects that we have found already, I can actually log them in our CleanSwell app. I'm just going to take my glove off real quick here and pass the camera off to my husband, actually, so I can show you what I'm doing. All right, so some of the things that we found, this one is actually probably fairly recent. It's really clean, all things considered. This is a plastic container. So I've logged into the CleanSwell app, and I have it up here on my tablet. Okay. And I can count this by clicking on the little bottles plastic. Now, we found 8 total already.
It's all just glare.
There's a lot of glare in there, so you can't see it, but I know it's there. I've clicked on the button that says bottles plastic. Most of what we found here today were plastic bottles, and most of them were actually likely littered by someone who was using this piece of this area. So they probably chose to leave their garbage behind here, but we are finding pieces of trash that maybe were not deliberately left here. We found some styrofoam containers. Now that's likely that this was being used by someone somewhere in the watershed, perhaps didn't properly dispose of it, put it in a trash can correctly, or let it sit outside for a long time, or an uncovered trash can somewhere in town where the wind could blow it out. So a piece of styrofoam also blew in here. We found a flip-flop, so I think that was probably lost by somebody else. It's in pretty rough shape, but somebody probably lost it, maybe wading in the water, and it was carried here by the river. Now it's flowing not so fast in this location, but it sort of gets a little narrower over there, and so you can perceive the flow speed. It's flowing really fast today because we had a ton of rain yesterday. There were storms coming through Connecticut yesterday, and so rain all over the place, carrying it in. And so now that water is carrying some of this marine debris down to the Thames River and Long Island Sound. So ways that we can help protect the watershed, not just physical trash can impact our watershed. There are other things that might affect Long Island Sound too, or the QUINEBAUG River. So the river is affected by nutrient runoff from fertilizers in the grass and on farms nearby. Also, there's a lot of paved surface in this part of the state, and so that's when the rain falls on the streets there, it does not go directly into the ground. It actually will travel across paved surfaces. I'm getting lots of messages right now, probably related to our connectivity. So I apologize if I'm not completely connected here, but I'll just finish by saying that things that are happening in the watershed will affect water quality, and that can impact our drinking water as well. So if we're allowing chemicals to leach into the ground or to travel across paved surfaces, or if we change our oil on our driveways and then that gets carried to the river, that can start to impact water quality for the animals that live here, affect the water table all across our area here. So we want to protect our beautiful environment here for the animals that use it, but also for the people that use it too. I'm sure some of the people who were using the bottles we found today were using this beautiful spot to go kayaking or fishing or enjoy the beautiful weather. The sun's coming out. And so we want this place to stay beautiful for them as well. So we're going to continue to clean up a little bit in this area. We're going to log all of our cleanup information on the CleanSwell app from the Ocean Conservancy. You can download that for free for Android or Apple products. So you can get the CleanSwell app and do a watershed cleanup near your home today. Even somewhere just along your street would make a big difference to the watershed. So thanks for watching. We'll see you at 11 a.m.
Good morning, happy Earth Day. My name is Callie. I am one of the educators here at Project O, and I'm actually coming at you from Branford today, which is my hometown, and I am here in the HOADLEY Creek watershed. So this is a small tributary of Long Island Sound, and if you know anything about the shoreline, Branford is one of the shoreline towns here, and so that means our coast hugs Long Island Sound. The habitat that we're going to be taking a look at today is actually freshwater, so I'll show you that. But I have some assistants here helping me. We've been out in the watershed and we've been collecting some trash right on our road actually. We live on a dead-end road, and so there's not a lot of traffic here, but we have found tons of trash. And so we actually filled up our entire bucket. I'll show you that. Filled up our entire bucket. We had to go back to our house to put it in a trash bag, and on our way back, this is what we have found so far. I've got my boys helping me here today. Graham, what kinds of things have we found? What have we picked up so far?
We found some plastic bottles and some glass bottles, and we found like a container where you put food in.
Okay, and so we've been trying to keep track of that all here on our Clean Swell app.
I found something.
Oh, and Grady is helping me. What is that, Grady? It looks like some piece of plastic. Why don't you put that in?
I'll put it in.
Okay, a straw wrapper it looks like he just found. And Graham, can you mark that on our app, please?
Hey, how about I use a straw?
Okay, excellent. There's a straw, click, and he can put that right on our app. Excellent. And so most of this trash that we've been finding, I think has actually come from the recycling truck. I've seen trash blow out of that on our road, or when people set out their recycling in their garbage bins to get picked up by the town on windy days, some of that ends up out here in our watershed. And so this is actually a really neat spot where we're at here. There's lots of woods and it kind of gets a little bit wet and kind of swampy down there. But in addition to that trash that we've been finding, there's something else in our watershed that I wanted to show you. So I'm gonna walk back to the edge of the woods up to the road. And in our neighborhood, we actually have storm drains. And so these storm drains are here to help with water flow and to prevent flooding on our road. And so you can see, and hopefully hear, that we have water flowing into the storm drains right now. Maybe you can see that through the grate. There are some leaves that are kind of collecting here, but these storm drains are a little bit different than, say, a sewer drain, or when you turn on the water in your home, or when you flush your toilet. That water goes to a different place than the water in these storm drains go. So the water from your house actually goes to a water treatment plant before it's released back into the environment. And so these storm drains go directly into the environment. They don't have any sort of filters on them. They don't get cleaned up in any way. And so our reminder here is only rain should go down the drain. Okay, it's a little rhyme. Say it with me now. Only rain should go down the drain, because that's the only thing that we want going in these storm drains. If you have old paint at home and you're not sure what to do with it, don't put it down here. If you have oil because you did an oil change at home, please don't put it down here, because it goes directly into our environment. So boys, will you walk with me? Let's show them where this storm drain goes, because we actually found the spot where it ends up into our environment here. And so we're just going into the woods a few steps here. And as we walk, we can see there's starting to be this kind of puddle, right? This little wet spot. And this is where the outflow of that storm drain is. Let me get to a better view. Graham's standing on the pipe right now. But can you see that? So
Coming from there, and it goes under the ground, and it comes out here.
yeah, and so we were pretty happy to see right around this area, we're really not seeing too much trash. We're seeing a lot of leaves that probably got carried down the storm drain, but we're not seeing too much trash in this direct area, so that's good. If we kind of keep scanning back deeper into the woods, you can see that there's lots of green back there. All of that green, that's right, Graham, it's skunk cabbage. So we've got a lot of skunk cabbage here. We also have some false hellebore. Thanks, Iris, for teaching me about that. And we've got some really neat ferns coming up, some fiddleheads. Those are just on their way out. And I'll see if I can find another spot. There are a whole bunch of dogtooth violets right now that are blooming in this area. So they have kind of a really neat leaf. It's kind of speckled, and we'll see if we can find those.
If you see these plants you need to watch out. Don't do that. Because they have little spikes and big spikes.
Yeah, there's also some prickers out here as well, so we're being careful of that as we're cleaning up. Here are some of those dogtooth violet leaves, if you can see those kind of speckled leaves. And I think there's one blooming right over here. Let me see if I can get it into view for y'all. Great, do you see any of those flowers?
Yeah.
Yeah? Where do you see one?
There.
Okay. So,
Right there, too.
oh, that's right. He's showing us some more of those leaves. All right, well.
Mom, right there.
Oh, thanks. Here's some more.
Mom, I did them to the
They're
kids.
kind of camouflaged
Mom,
right
Mama.
now. I'm not seeing any of those blooms right here. Okay,
Could you
So-
go down to them?
this is, again, the Hoadley Creek Watershed in Brantford. We're encouraging all of you at home to get out today and enjoy this Earth Day. Hopefully do a cleanup somewhere close to you. That Clean Swell app is a really helpful tool, and it will help keep track of the kinds of trash you find as well as how much trash that you collect. Okay, so thanks so much. We hope that you share your results with us from your own beach cleanups, and I hope you check in with Marissa at 12 o'clock today. Thanks so much. Bye.
Glass bottle. A wipe. Glass debris. Milk jug. Oil container with oil in it. Turkey wrapper. One plastic bottle. Two chip wrap. Plastic wrapper. Styrofoam cup. Plastic bag. I found a huge water jug. Plastic. Like 5 gallons. 4 styrofoam and a wrapper. Oh, hi. I didn't see you guys there. How you doing today? Welcome to my family's Earth Day cleanup. If you guys have been doing your own cleanup or you plan to do your own cleanup later this week, I want you to put it in the comments where you're going to be picking up trash, because I'm just curious to see where we're going to help out neighborhoods this week. So today we are actually in Windham. We are at a park, and we are actually in a really cool place within the Thames River watershed. So the water that you just saw is actually the Willimantic River, which, if you continue down that way a little bit, actually meets up with the Natchog River to create the Shetucket River. So I made a little map for you guys so you can kind of see where we're at. I crumpled in my pocket, but can you see it? So the red star is where we are right now. Like I said, we are at the meeting between those two rivers. Each one is about 18 or 20 miles long. And then it meets the Shetucket River and continues down till you get to the QUINEBAUG, which is where Debbie was this morning. And then a little further down, it meets up with the YANTIC and creates the Thames, which heads down to Long Island Sound. So from where we are now to Long Island Sound is about 35.5 miles. So another really cool thing about this environment is the sewage treatment plant, which is actually at the convergence between these two rivers. So I want to take you guys up to just give you guys a little peek of it. So if you want to follow me this way, I'm going to grab some of the many buckets of trash that we've collected today. Kate, can you grab that on your way out? All right, follow us, fam.
Melissa says she's cleaning up in Thailand. Awesome. I want to know, what's the coolest thing you guys have caught, or not caught, that you've picked up and cleaned up, or the most unusual? I'm going to show you guys what we found a little later in this video. So we are headed back up to the park from the river. We just finished cleaning up this area. For now, we're going to come back afterwards as well. And we're going to have to hop a fence, so bear with us. So we are now in Rec Park. There has been a lot of trash. We brought 4 buckets with us today, and we fill those up really quickly. So we actually borrowed an empty trash can to kind of dump our things into. So let us dump this stuff for a minute. And we've got this filled up to about here right now. And we've been here since, I don't know, a little after 11. The wastewater treatment plant and tell you a little bit how you guys are impacting it as well. So behind me, on the other side of the picnic table, on the other side of the playset, is the sewage treatment plant for Wyndham. So I'm going to get a little bit out of the wind here. It's a little windy where I am. And this sewage treatment plant is actually helping to take care of all the water within YANTIC. So when you flush your toilet, when you run your sinks, all that water will end up here, especially if you're in a city type environment and you have sewer systems. This is where your water's going. So it's important that you do not throw any miscellaneous items down the toilet, especially. The only thing that should go down the toilet is your bodily waste and toilet paper. I know flushable wipes are supposed to be flushable, but they do not degrade. Things like grease from cooking should not go down the drains. They should go in the trash can because they will clog your pipes and they will mess up the plant. And even your family goldfish should not go down there because it will not biodegrade in time and they'll just have to take it out. So the first step when your waste gets to the plant is they're going to filter out a lot of that solid waste. So let's go over here a little bit, Reed. So way back in the late 1800s when they first started using sewer systems, and at that time, before that, they would just kind of throw it into the environment. They didn't really know how it had an impact on that. So when they first started sewers, they only dealt with the solid waste. All of the bacteria and the microbes, the nutrients were not being filtered out. They were just being put back into the environment. So the rivers, especially around here, are used a lot for recreation. There's a lot of kayaking and a lot of fishing. So when you are putting bacteria and nutrients into the water, it's having a negative impact on those animals. So around 1972, shout out if you were around during that time, and they started creating a secondary treatments which took out those nutrients and bacteria. So it's really important that we are not putting trash down it. Even if you're picking up litter today, that could potentially get into the city sewer systems and make its way there. So it's important, especially if you're cleaning up today or this week, to go ahead and do that so that you're limiting what's going into our sewers. I want to show you quickly some of the cool stuff that we caught, that we found. Can you tell I usually work on a boat? So, I found a sneaker, only one, found an Air Jordan. I found, let me put my gloves on for this. I found a mouth guard. I found a piece of chalk and a bouncy ball and a little rubber pony toy. But the coolest thing that we found today, which is actually what my mother found pretty much right when we started, she found a fresh $20 bill on the ground. I walked right past it, you guys, and I didn't see it, and I'm really sad about that. So I hope you guys go ahead and do your own cleanup at some point throughout the week. We are going to be adding all these cleanups to our running total through Sunday. So if you guys do a cleanup and you take some pictures, we took some before and after pictures that we're gonna post a little later today, just to kind of see what it looks like before you touched it and then after. Also just some funny pictures throughout, some of the weird things you found. My sister with the camera actually found a full diaper. So that was something that definitely needed to be photographed. We're also using the CleanSwell app today, and we have gotten over 100 food wrappers to count. We are still in the process of doing our cleanup, so I don't have the totals, but I'll add them a little later. So if you guys want to be added to our challenge, then definitely post some photos either to Facebook or Instagram with the hashtag ProjectOCleanup. And if you use the CleanSwell app, we have a username and login that you can use to kind of run towards our total. If you're in a group and you're cleaning together and you want to be added to our leaderboard, you need to take a screenshot of your totals after you submit and email it to our email. I'll put it in the description, but it's cleanup@oceanology.org, so that we can add your team separate to kind of see who's in the lead. So happy Earth Week, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow when we're going to be on an island looking at marine debris and how it affects birds. And stay tuned next hour for Molly. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Hello everyone, this is Molly and this is Greta, and we're here on behalf of Project Oceanology for our Earth Day cleanup. So we decided to do a cleanup right outside of our house today. Greta, why did you decide to help me clean up today?
Because I wanted to help you tell the names of the garbage.
Okay.
And because I wanted to tell you something. It pollutes nature! And I wanted to tell you something else.
Okay, one more.
When we sort the garbage.
When we sort the garbage, okay. So our road is kind of busy. This is our road here. So we actually did a lot of our cleanup already because we didn't think it was safe to be trying to go live and use the app while we were collecting garbage. So we're gonna head down to where the garbage is. Oh, did you find something else to put in there? Glasses? We just found a pair of glasses. So Greta and I, yeah, put it right in the bucket. Good job, Greta, good eye. We live, good,
So,
that's
I
the,
found another lens for the glass.
that's the weirdest thing we found so far, I think. Here, let's go. We live in the Thames River watershed, and in particular, our watershed is the Poquatonic Brook, which empties into the Thames River, and then the Thames River empties right into Long Island Sound. So pollution and things like that, things that when rain falls on our house, or if pollution comes on the road, that goes into the brook and it could end up in Long Island Sound. So that's one of the reasons we cleaned up today. So Greta, let's take a look at some of the different types of things that we found today. Let's switch the camera over. So we look at all this stuff, first of all. We're going to be logging it on an app called the CleanSwell app, but let's talk about it. So first off, let's look at this bucket here.
I'm dumping this stuff out.
Oh, okay. Be careful not to let it blow away. This is what we just found at the end of the driveway in our most recent effort. So we found a pair of glasses.
With a lens.
Yeah. And look at these things we found right here. Do you know what these are?
Help putting this in.
We're not going to put the glasses back together right now. Just leave it like this. I don't think it can be fixed. I don't think those glasses can be fixed. These things right here are called cigarette butts. They're for people smoking. I don't want our trash that we just collected to blow away, so I'm going to grab it and put it in this bucket right here. But cigarette butts are actually when people do cleanups. So we're participating with the Ocean Conservancy using their CleanSwell app today. And one of the things we've learned from the Ocean Conservancy is that cigarette butts are the most commonly found type of debris on our shores. And we did some research today, didn't we, Greta, on how long different types of trash last in nature?
Mom?
Cigarette butts last from 1 to 5 years. Yes, do you have something you want to tell them? Here.
I want to tell them about the turtle.
About the turtles. Okay, let's talk about that right now. Okay, so here's another bucket we found, and this is a whole bunch of food wrappers and food wrappers and plastic bags. And look at all this plastic. This is plastic wrapping, maybe from the construction site nearby. And Greta, you wanted to share some information, I think, about what happens to plastic bags in the ocean.
Turtles think it's jellyfish, and they want to eat it.
Yeah. So Greta, do you know how might a plastic bag get from near our house to the ocean? Because we don't live in the ocean. The wind. Okay, so the wind could blow a plastic bag, or it could go into the stream, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Because we live near some streams, and those streams, we're in the watershed where the streams empty into Pocatonic Brook, which comes out on the Thames River. And so a plastic bag from our house could indeed end up all the way in Long Island Sound, where wildlife could end up eating it, and it could get hurt that way, couldn't it? Okay, one of the most common things that we found are actually these. Do you see this huge bin, Greta? This is all plastic bottles and plastic cups. And now, do you know what the problem is with plastics in particular in the watershed? Why should we worry about that? Yeah, don't touch it without your gloves, please. What's the problem with plastic going into nature? We find a lot. Animals can eat it. What else? How long does plastic last?
Like forever.
Like forever, indeed. In fact, the plastic bottle that goes into our watershed, that can last approximately 450 or 500 years. It can take that long to break down. So it really is true that when we put plastics in our watershed, those things are around for a really long time. Can we think of any alternatives to drinking out of plastic disposable bottles?
Don't drink out of them. Drink out the reusable.
She says don't drink out of them and drink out of reusable bottles. That is really good advice. One more question. How do you think some of these things ended up on our roadside? Where do we think they got here? Do you know? Greta, do you have any ideas about, don't do that. Do you have any ideas about how you think some of these things we collected ended up on our roadside?
People threw them off in the cars.
So possibly people threw them out of their cars, or maybe when the garbage and recycling trucks come, they fall. Here's another type of thing that we found a lot of. This is an aluminum can. This is probably out of somebody's recycling. And these aluminum cans can also last for hundreds and hundreds of years before they break down, up to 200 years. We also found an example of a glass bottle, and they can also take a really long time to break down, hundreds of years. We found this really unusual looking thing. Greta, any guesses about what this might be? Don't touch it, just look at it.
It's something from the road. It's the thing, the lines on the road.
Oh, good job. It took me forever to figure this out, but this is actually a piece of the road paint. And we found it all over the place along the side of the road. So for somehow it was coming up and littering the side of the road, and eventually I guess this stuff breaks down, but it probably is pretty nasty because it's outdoor paint. We found a lot of styrofoam. Styrofoam will break down in about 50 years. And let's see. We found some other very specific types of plastic. So in this container here, here's some smaller stuff. We found a lot more cigarette butts. Again, that's the most common type of trash that ends up in Long Island Sound. We found more styrofoam, like this egg carton. And then look what else we found. plastic straws. Again, another plastic that was, this is just one plastic straw that got smushed, maybe on the road. And plastic straws can also, because they're plastic, they can last for hundreds of years. Some other things you might be wondering about, grocery bags take up to 20 years to biodegrade, and even then, when these plastic things break down, they don't break down all the way, they just break down into microplastics. And it's more likely, even in a place like this, here in Ledyard, Connecticut, where I'm not right next to the ocean, the smaller the pieces of plastic get, the more likely they're going to be carried down a storm drain. Maybe many of you tuned in earlier and saw Callie and her family talking about storm drains and how storm drains can sometimes carry water right from your community straight out into the Sound. So on this Earth Day, thank you for joining us. I hope you are out finding a way yourselves to clean up nature. Whoa, I'm gonna have to rescue that piece of styrofoam there. Ah! I hope you're finding out a way to clean up yourselves. Project O has been live every hour. We have one more left at 2 o'clock, so tune back in to join Kyle. Or go out and do a cleanup yourself. If you do, please let us know. Email your results to cleanup@oceanology.org. If you go on our website, you can see directions, or look on our Facebook page for directions on how to join into our cleanup. And if you send us your information, we'll include you on our leaderboard. Our goal is to do 50 cleanups and clean up at least 50 pounds of trash this week, Earth Week. So shout out to everyone who's watching. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be seeing you later this week.
All right, everyone, I want to welcome you to the YANTIC riverbank. Thanks for tuning in. Let me see if I can turn this camera around. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Kyle from Project Oceanology, here for our Earth Day cleaning ceremony. All of us educators at Project O have been cleaning up different areas of Connecticut's watersheds in the wild, and trying to gather up as much pollution as we can in the watershed. So I want to talk a little bit about where I am, why we're doing this, and how come it's such a big part of our Earth Week celebration. So I'm just going to turn my camera around again so you can get a look of the river and where I am today. All right, let me just turn that around. All right. So again, this is a section of the YANTIC River. It's a 14-mile long tributary of the Thames River. Starts in Lebanon, a couple miles east of Colchester, and runs 14 miles all the way down through Lebanon, Basra, and Norwich, where it meets the headwaters of the Thames River. It joins the Shetucket and forms that river in the marina down that way. So up here we have the falls at Indian Leap. They're around that bend there, and this is a very historically important site. The Mohegan tribe had a village down in this ravine back in the day, and they used it for many agricultural purposes. They actually grew corn and beans and squash right on these riverbanks, and they also caught clams, eels, and other species of anadromous and freshwater and marine fish. Now, the Yantic River has had some troubles recently, in recent decades. It was actually, up until the late 90s, considered one of the most polluted rivers east of the Mississippi. And it wasn't until certain improvements to wastewater treatment facilities of tributaries and towns other than Norwich, and this pipeline that I'm showing you actually is one of those, diverting water instead of running directly into the Yantic. It actually brings it over onto Hollyhock Island, which is right here, and that's where the Norwich wastewater treatment facility is. Okay, so diverting some water that way helps to eliminate a little bit of the pollution that the river saw. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of pollution that we can find. So before you tuned in, I was kind of walking around on here collecting some litter. You see one of my trash buckets over there. But as you can see, this is a pretty well-maintained area of Norwich. This is the Heritage Trail. So it's kind of like a city park where people can come and walk their dogs, and it's a nice area to be outside. So a lot of it is pretty well cleaned up. However, once you get from that upper trail down to the river itself, you can start to find a lot of litter that goes unnoticed. So I can just show you what I've got so far. So a lot of it was glass, broken ceramics, some soft drinks, things like that. But I also found a soccer ball that had floated downriver and washed up onto the banks. Luckily, I'm wearing gloves for this because somebody also decided to clean up after their pet but didn't throw it away because they didn't want to carry it. So a little dog litter as well. And that's all just along the banks here. So some of it can go unnoticed. Now, the different kinds of pollution I want to talk about are point source and non-point source pollution. So point source, if some of you may guess by the name, you can actually figure out where it came from. And generally that's a little bit easier to regulate. If you see a factory dumping a bunch of stuff into a river, you can regulate that factory, say stop doing that, and that should help abate some of the pollution coming into it. However, if you can't tell where the pollution's coming from, then it's harder to regulate and harder to control. So one of the big problems for the Yantic River was a while ago, some of you who have grown up in this area, you may know that the tributaries along the Thames and the Yantic and Shetucket all were home to a lot of mill towns. So villages popped up and had different sources of mills, textile factories, textile mills, paper mills, things like that. And a lot of them used industrial equipment that needed to be either cooled or produce some waste that they would end up just putting directly into the river. So when people started realizing that that impacted the health of the river too dramatically for people to continue to fish or clam and things like that along there, then they started to regulate it, and a lot of those mills have become obsolete or put out of commission. So those would be the point source. However, there's still a lot of pollution coming into the river. So I'd like to see some comments on here. I'd like to see where you think some of the pollution coming into the Yantic River might come from. Think about what kinds of industries are going on or still continuing to stay in those towns, Basra, Lebanon, things like that. It looks like I have some comments coming in, but rather slowly. But the non-point source pollution, that's the stuff that you can't really see. And it was a big problem for the Yantic River and also the headwaters of the Thames River where it connects with the Shetucket, because well, the dynamic of the ecosystem there is really complicated. It's basically a combination of fresh and salt water. So you have two freshwater rivers, the Yantic and the Shetucket, flowing into the harbor at Norwich, where you get some salt water coming up from Long Island Sound. Now it sounds crazy because it's a pretty long river, but there's actually salt water coming all the way up there. And if we learned anything from our density lessons in previous Facebook Live videos, we know that salt water and fresh water have different densities, and they tend not to mix very well. So the salt water comes in, stays on the bottom, fresh water floating on top, inhibits that water coming up and mixing, and that can create a kind of stagnant layer of water down the bottom where you get little to no oxygen in the summertime. So I'm seeing Debbie saying nutrient runoff from farms and from parts of the state, and that's exactly a good example of non-point source pollution. So think about all of the little brooks and streams that run along farms in those towns. Basra has a heavy farming population. There's lots of chicken farms and goat farms and things like that. And a lot of those farmers, they like to make their land more productive, so they'll add nutrients to the soil in the form of fertilizer, sometimes synthetic fertilizer. And when it rains, all that excess fertilizer, if it's not already taken up by producers or by the soil, it's going to end up washing down with the water to wherever that water leads. It may run into a brook that runs into the Yantic, that ends up into the Thames, then goes down to Long Island Sound and eventually the ocean, or it could end up in a storm drain. And storm drains will also lead down to wastewater treatment plants where the effluent actually goes into the harbor. On low tide days, you can actually go into Norwich Harbor and see the output from the wastewater treatment facility upwelling into the harbor directly. Now, nutrients are great for plants. You know, they need those producers like terrestrial plants and marine algae need those nutrients in order to photosynthesize. So that's all good, but if you have too much, you can end up with huge algal blooms that deplete all the oxygen in the water, and you end up with dead zones or hypoxic layers where you end up with not enough oxygen to support other living organisms in those areas. So the bottom 2/3 of Norwich Harbor, if that gets depleted of oxygen because there's no mixing, then you're not going to find those clams and crabs and worms and things that you normally found in this region. So I did want to, oh, I just found some more trash actually. Little bottle cap here, let me pick that up. So I still have a long way of walking down this river to finish collecting things, but if you have any questions, feel free to post them up here. We'll try and get them answered and highlighted. Also, if you're helping us out with this Earth Day cleanup project, feel free to share with us any of your progress. We're using the CleanSwell app, so you can log your participation on there. You can take a screenshot and send us your results at Project O Cleanup, and we'll get you a shout out on social media. We'd love to see how many areas are taking action in cleaning up for Earth Day, and we like to see exactly how much we're getting done. All right. So stay tuned. All week we have some Earth Day content. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary. So happy Earth Day.